All right, friends. So when we last left off, we had two pieces of fabric. So we have the single piece of pillowcase, and then the piece that we had interface or had fused the interface and vacuum cleaner filter paper to it, right? So now is when we're going to start getting down to actually sewing. This is the fun part. So um, I recognize that I'm extremely fortunate to have a fancy dancy newer sewing machine that has some computerized options. It makes threading and filling the bobbin and a bunch of different stitches like ridiculously easy. I've never had this before this year. It just happened to have been my Christmas present. So I feel very, very fortunate to be in that position. But I will say I'm a complete novice. I don't even know like the technical terms for a lot of this stuff, so I'm making it up as I go. So I'm sure if you're following along at home and you have actual tribal knowledge, please feel free to let me know. But I will also do a version of this um, at some point down the road with how to hand sew or to use an older or slash jankier type of sewing machine that doesn't have all these fancy options to just try to make do. Because really, in the end, no one's going to give a shit if your sewing machine has digital numbers. It really comes down to, are you making the safest, tightest, most comfortable and wearable and washable mask possible so that healthcare workers can get the most use out of it. So this is where we're at. If I were newer, this is what I would be doing. I would be putting the front up and then the other front down so that they're facing each other. And I'm going to want to sew the long ways. So this is going to be our 11 inch versus our 9 inch, right? Essentially, think about we're going to make a tube of sorts. And so when I was first doing this, the first couple times, I was feeling a little unsure about, making sure everything was going to stay together. I would actually pin a couple ways along the ways. And one thing I do remember from junior high home ec is as long as your pins are perpendicular to the edge of the fabric, that your sewing machine needle should be able to go right over them. So you don't have to do this kind of like stop, start the whole way down. Now, because I've been doing this at least a good couple dozen times now and feel pretty confident about how I'm feeding everything through the system, I'm actually just going to go for broke. Which, if I had thought this through, I might have actually put thread in my system first. All right, well, this is actually a great point to talk about the thread. So I had some of the older threads, like I've tried sewing with this one and had it break numerous times, so I'm not going to anymore. I only have 3 bobbins, so the idea of unwinding and winding bobbins a bunch of times just to make sure that the fabric matches perfectly is definitely not up to par with the lazy perfectionist standards. So we are going to go with the artistic license of pink on red. Like, seriously, fight me though. All right, so for my particular system, I'm pretty fortunate that loading it is not too difficult. I kind of put the thread spool on, put this little endy bit, yes, that's the technical term, thread it through here. I need to make sure that my needle is all the way up. And then I also have this, this gives me more joy than I should say. It has a built-in threader that I hook on. Oh, look at that magic. I never had this before in any of my other sewing machines, so just let me enjoy the little things. All right, and then we got to put our bobbin in. And this one, again, it's kind of unfairly easy. You just put it in. It actually has like a little cutting tool here. Look at that. Then obviously I need to make sure to pick up my bobbin thread. So I'm going to hold this, reach down, make friends with my bobbin thread, and pull it through. Oh, but that's what happens if I make it too short. There we go. So now we should be good to go. So I'm not going to waste time by pinning. We're going to pop it right in here, approximate it. With this particular stitch, I'm going to do, it's kind of hugs the left side, so I can go pretty much to the left side with my foot. It's a foot, right? It looks like a foot. We're calling it a foot. All right. And normally if it were really important, I would kind of go forward, backwards, like to reinforce. But because I'm actually going to be putting in reinforcement like counter thread here, we don't really have to worry about that. All right, let's see what we got. I have a couple sewing friends that I'm actually kind of mortified to have see this, because this is such amateur hour, but this is why it's beneficial to be a lazy perfectionist, because the end result looks just fine. All right, so we've got that seam down. We're going to do the other side. I'm really glad. My first couple tries, I was having horrible time with like bobbin tension. I think I've been able to get the worst out. So, all right. So now we have the tube. We're going to turn it inside out. And this is where things actually get a lot easier. I'm going to pause real quick. I'm going to go iron this to make sure that the seams are flat. And I'll be right back. All right. Due to the magic of technology, we now have a lovely ironed flat piece of fabric. And you might notice the little X here because, again, the hellscape in my head means I have to look at this every possible way to see, once it's folded, how's it going to look the nicest? And this was the version that I decided upon. So obviously no one gives a shit. And if they do, like, it's kind of adorable. Try to make your own. However, it's the little things that give me joy. So at this point, now we've got the most difficult part is done. It should go pretty quick. So we're going to take a length of the pipe cleaner. I pretty much go across because I like how it conforms not only to the nose, but to the cheek as well. I used to have to wear a mask. I, in another lifetime, worked in clinical research, so I know what it's like to wear one of those suckers all day long. And having something that fits a little more neatly against the cheeks and ears, to me would be better. But if you happen to be watching this and you're a healthcare professional and you want to tell me to go fuck myself, please tell me, because I will refine my efforts. I will not pretend to know everything. So again, my first bunch of tries, I spent a lot of time pinning this in before putting the stitch in. This one wants to be particularly bendy. I've kind of gotten a feel for how to sew it so that I create kind of a channel for it. I tried before doing like a fold over, and then I just found, like, if I were a healthcare worker, having that junk of fabric on my nose would make me completely insane. So if you want to be really precise, kind of take anything like a pencil or a pen. You can kind of push the pencil cleaner up and then kind of pin it like this, a pin below it, and then that'll keep it in place while you're sewing it. I might just put a couple in here for shits and giggles. Kind of where I'm feeling it bend. Where are you? There we go. And then I'm going to sew that channel. Where's my front? That's my front. If you happen to sew, does it really matter which way you put the pins? I suppose it probably makes more sense to do it this way so you can take it out, right? Oh, please tell me in the comments. I need all those little nitpicky tricks. Oops. Little sucker decided to come out. All right, it'll be fine. All right, I'm gonna cut that. So a good rule of thumb might be to really make sure all your pins are gone before you send it to a healthcare worker to put on their face. Oh, for the love of God, I had someone give the baby a blanket, my 2-year-old, which was handmade, and it was absolutely beautiful. And there was a stick pin still stuck in it. Thank God it got me and not her. But yeah, count your stick pins. All right, so now the easiest part of all is going to be making the pleats. So I kind of eyeball these. I like to go a little bit more above. There we go. I'm sure there's some kind of formula. Couldn't be bothered to Google it because I've worn enough masks before to know, like, as long as it's got the ability to kind of come out enough from your face. It's like the worst thing is having a mask that makes you feel claustrophobic. Okay, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm feeling pretty good with it. I'm going to take it away for a second and go iron it. Pause. All right, we're getting close. So the biggest part now, we're not going to worry too much about trim on this one, but we do want to make sure that we get the elastic in. So one way around trim is if you have a pair of pinking shears. It actually usually helps if you know where your pinking shears are. So forget about pinking shears because, oh wait, you're there. All right, got it. So pinking shears will give kind of this edge to your fabric that will at least minimize some of the unraveling. Now, I still have yet to figure out a good plan. I've kind of done the pinking shears before and after doing the pleating. It seems to actually work better after, but I'm sure you all will have opinions. Oh God, this is a freaking mess. Hold on. That's better. It looks like a third grade project. Hi. All right, nonetheless, onwards and upwards. So we need some way to affix this to the face. So I'm going to get my elastic. It seems like about 6.5 inches seems to be a good rule of thumb. There's a couple other tools that I've seen or kind of patterns that like my mom's doing one and my stepsister's mother's doing one, that basically is like a hairband that will affix it, and then it doesn't have like so much pressure behind the ears, which I actually think is kind of freaking brilliant. But for purposes of this, I'm just going to pin this down. And this is where the pins actually work out really well, because there's one thing you don't want to do is have a mask be rendered completely useless because you were too lazy. Part of being a lazy perfectionist is finding the appropriate level of laziness. There's a ratio, I think. The lazy to effectiveness ratio. All right, so we're going to pin that down. And then the last trick that I'll show with this, because I mean, effectively, this could be ready to go after this if you weren't wanting to get fancy with trimming, is trying to get the thicker fabric through the machine without it bunching. That's from most of the folks that I've talked to who are struggling with, you know, newbie sewing machine skills. That seems to be the biggie. Ouch. So couple tricks. Number one, make sure you're sewing down a pleat. If you try sewing up a pleat, this just wants to like bunch up the whole way and you're going to hate your life. So with this one, a couple things. So if I'm not going to be doing trim, I like to do one of the stitches that is like a ziggy-zaggy something. So that gives it a little bit more like foundation. I'm sure there's a word for it. Don't particularly care. And we're going to put that there. And then this is where I like to use my seam ripper to kind of help move it through. Just give it a try. It actually helps if I do the stitch. There we go. Slow you down. And then it likes to bunch, and then I want to cry. There we go. So this is where I'm probably going to want the most help from some of my sewing friends, because for the love of God, I cannot get even stitching. Which doesn't matter if I'm putting bias tape over it. But as is, makes me want to crawl under a rock. All right, but the other thing to keep in mind too, from a healthcare perspective, you don't want to put the contour with the pleats facing up, because think about it, you're literally just making pockets by which viruses and bacteria and snot and eyelashes and all that stuff is just going to catch. So just make sure that when you're sewing it, pleats go down. Okay, this is what I'm going to go backwards because I want the pleats. Nope, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to go this way. So I want the pleats away from me. There you go. Woohoo! It's like having a baby. Oh, more pain. Ugh, and you're allowed to not like your baby. Sigh. So, look at me. Remember to take the pins out. And with that, you have, not yet, a bare bones mask, but it's dual filter. Hopefully it provides a little bit more protection. Elastics that are not going to pull out because they're nice and reinforced, doubly reinforced. You've got coverage from ear to ear. It's not the prettiest thing you'll ever see. I'll probably do another pass on the iron to make sure the pleats are down. And then I will have a separate video where I talk about sanitization, because that's absolutely critical. All right, I'm not overthinking it. Yay, look at this great mask. Woohoo. Thanks, guys. And until next time.